The 31st of March 1999, Volume 2, The Value of Sufferings. This morning my adorable Jesus made himself seen crucified, and after he communicated his pains to me, he told me, "Many are the wounds that made me suffer during my passion, but one was the cross." This means that many are the roads through which I draw souls to perfection, but one is the heaven in which these souls must unite. So if one misses that heaven, there is no other which can make them blessed forever. Then he added, "Take a look. One is the cross, but this cross was formed with various pieces of wood. This means that one is heaven, but this heaven contains various places, more or less glorious, and these places will be distributed according to the sufferings suffered down here, more or less heavy. If all knew the preciousness of suffering, they would compete with one another to suffer more. But this science is not recognized by the world, so they abhor all that can make them richer for eternity." End of the reading. The 31st of March 1901, Volume 4, Inconstancy and Volubility. This morning feeling all embittered, I saw myself still so bad, Cativa, that I almost did not dare to go in search of my highest and only good. But the Lord, looking at my miseries, still deigned to come, telling me, "My daughter, is it me that you want? Well then, I have come to cheer you. Let us be together, but let us remain in silence." And after staying for some time, he transported me outside of myself, and I saw that the church was celebrating the Day of the Palms. And Jesus, breaking the silence, told me, "How much volubility, how much inconstancy. Just as today they cried out, 'Hosanna,' proclaiming me as their king, on another day they cried out, 'Crucify him, crucify him.' My daughter, the thing that displeases me the most is inconstancy and volubility, because this is the sign that the truth has not taken possession of these souls. Even in things of religion, it may be that they find their satisfaction, their own convenience and interest, or that they just find themselves in that party. But tomorrow these things may be missing, or they may find themselves involved in other parties. And here is how they deviate from religion, and with no regret they give themselves to other sects. Indeed, when the true light of truth enters a soul and takes possession of a heart, she is not subject to inconstancy. On the contrary, she sacrifices everything for love of it, and to let herself be mastered by it alone. And with unconquered heart, she despises everything else, which does not belong to the truth. And while saying this, he cried over the condition of the present generation, worse than in those times, subject to inconstancy, according to wherever the winds blow. End of the reading. The 31st of March 1926, Volume 19. One who does the divine will must possess everything that belongs to it. The soul who lives in the divine will must do the will of God as God does it. My poor mind was dissolving in the divine will, and an endless light was invading the little circle of my intelligence. And while it seemed that this light was as though centralized in my mind, it would spread outside and fill the whole atmosphere, and penetrating even into the heavens, it seemed as though centralized in the divinity. But who can say what one could feel and comprehend while being in that light? One could feel the fullness of happiness. Nothing could penetrate into that light, which might shade the joy, the beauty, the strength, the penetration of the divine secrets, and the knowledge of the supreme mysteries. Then while I was swimming in that light, my always lovable Jesus told me, "My daughter, This light, this dwelling so enchanting, which knows neither sunset nor night, is my will. Everything is complete in it: happiness, strength, beauty, knowledge of the Supreme Being, and so on. This light, so endless, which is our will, came out of the womb of the divinity as the heritage of man, the most beautiful inheritance we could give him. It came out of our inmost womb, bringing with itself a share of all our goods, to let the creature inherit them, and to form him as all beautiful and holy, in the likeness of the one who had created him. See then, my daughter, what it means to do my will and to live in it. There is no good that exists in heaven and on earth which it does not possess. I want you to know them. Otherwise, how can you love them, possess them, and use them in the different circumstances? If you do not know that you have a divine strength at your disposal, you will lose heart for a trifle. If you do not know that you possess a divine beauty, you will not have the courage to be with me in a familiar way. You will feel dissimilar from me, and will not have the audacity to snatch from me that the fiat may come and reign upon earth. If you do not know that everything I have created is yours, you will not love me in all things, and will not have the fullness of true love, and so with all the other things. If you do not know all the goods which my will possesses, that there is nothing which does not belong to it, and which you must possess, it would happen to you as to a poor one who was given 1,000,000, but without letting him know that such an amount has been placed in his little hovel. Poor one, because he does not know the good he possesses, he continues his poor life, his stomach half empty, his clothes tattered, and he drinks in sips the bitterness of his poverty. But if he knows it, he changes his fortune. He turns the hovel into a palace. He feeds himself abundantly, clothes himself with decency, and drinks the sweet sips of his richness. So as many goods as one might possess, if he does not know them, it is as if he did not have them. This is the reason why so very often I expand your capacity, I give you more knowledges about my will, and I make known to you everything that belongs to it, so that you may possess not only my will, but everything that belongs to it. Besides, in order to come to reign in the soul, my supreme will wants to find its goods, its dominions, and the soul must make them her own, so that upon coming to reign within her, it may find its own dominions, over which to lay its regime, its command. If it does not find heaven and earth within the soul, over what can it reign? Here is the necessity for which my will wants to centralize all goods in you, and you must know them, love them, and possess them, so that being in you, it may find its kingdom, and it may dominate and rule over it. Afterwards, I was thinking about what Jesus had told me, and more than ever I could see my littleness. I said to myself, how can I centralize within myself everything that the divine will contains? It seems to me that the more he speaks, the littler I become and the more incapable I feel. So how can this be? And Jesus, coming back, added, my daughter, you must know that my celestial mamma was able to conceive me, eternal word, within her most pure womb, because she did the will of God as God did it. All the other prerogatives which she possessed, that is, virginity, conception without original sin, sanctity, and the seas of graces that she possessed, were not sufficient means to be able to conceive a God, because all these prerogatives gave her neither the immensity nor the all-seeingness to be able to conceive a God who is immense and who sees everything, and even less the fecundity to be able to conceive him. In sum, she would have lacked the seed of divine fecundity, but by possessing the supreme will as her own life, and by doing the will of God as God does it, she received the seed of divine fecundity, and with it the immensity and the all-seeingness. Therefore, in a natural way, I could be conceived in her, because I lack neither immensity nor all that belongs to my being. Now, my daughter, the centralization of everything that belongs to my will be as though natural for you also, if you arrive at doing the divine will as God himself does it. The will of God in you and that which reigns within God himself will be one. What is the wonder then, if everything which is of God and which this will rules, preserves, and dominates is also yours? Rather, what is needed is that you know what belongs to it, so that you may love the goods you possess, and in loving them you may acquire the right of possession. Doing the will of God as God does it was the highest, the most substantial, the most necessary point for my mamma in order to obtain the longed-for Redeemer. All of her other prerogatives were the superficial part, the decency, the decorum which befitted her. The same for you. If you want to obtain the longed-for fiat, you must arrive at this, doing the will of God as God does it. End of the reading. The 31st of March, 1927, Volume 21. How the soul who lives in the divine will is the triumph of it. Threats of wars, union of all races. I felt all immersed and abandoned in the divine will, and while I continued my acts in it, my sweet Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, my daughter, the soul who lives in my divine will is the triumph of it. As the soul does her acts in it, it puts out its bilocating virtue that, hovering throughout the whole creation, extends its divine life in it. So the soul who lives in my will gives me the occasion to bilocate my life for as many acts as she does in it, and therefore not only is she the triumph of my will, but it receives more honour from the soul who acts in it than from the whole creation. In fact, in creating each thing, God placed in some the shadow of his light, in some the notes of his love, in some others the image of his power, in others the flowerings of his beauty. So each created thing has something that belongs to its creator. But in the soul who lives in the divine fiat, God places all of himself. He centralizes his whole being in her, and by locating in her, he fills the whole creation with the acts that the soul does in his will, in order to receive love, glory, and adoration from her for each thing that came out of our creative hands. So one who lives in it places herself in relation with all created things, and taking to heart the honour of her Creator through the same relations that she receives for each thing, from the smallest to the greatest thing created, she sends a requital of her relations for all that her Creator has done. Therefore, all communications are open between the soul and God. The creature enters the divine order and enjoys perfect harmony with the Supreme Being. And because of this, she is the true triumph of my will. On the other hand, one who does not live in it lives with the human will, and therefore all communications with the Supreme Being are closed. Everything is disorder and disharmony. Her relations are with her own passions, and through her passions she sends her acts. She knows nothing about the news of her Creator. More than serpent she crawls on the earth and lives in the disorder of human things. Therefore the soul who lives with her human will is the dishonour of mine and the defeat of the divine fiat in the work of creation. What sorrow, my daughter, what sorrow! The human will that wants to defeat the will of its Creator, who loves the creature so much and wants, in his triumph, the triumph of the creature herself. Then I was lamenting to Jesus because of his privations, since now, perhaps more than ever, he's making me suffer his being away for a longer time. Yet he tells me that he loves me. Who knows? He might end up leaving me completely. But while I was thinking of this, my sweet Jesus moved in my interior, surrounding me with light. And in that light, he made me see wars and fierce revolutions, civil and against Catholics. One could see all races fighting, and all of them in the act of preparing for more wars. And Jesus, all afflicted, told me, "My daughter, you do not know how my burning heart wants to run with love toward creatures. But while it runs, they reject it, while they run toward me with the most brutal offences and with the most horrendous pretences. So as my love sees itself being persecuted, my justice enters the field and defends my love, striking with scourges those who persecute me, and uncovering the pretences they make, not only with me, but also among themselves as nations, because in brawling they reveal themselves, that instead of loving one another, they hate one another fiercely. This century can be called the century of the most awful pretences, and among all classes. And this is why they never come to an agreement among themselves. And while apparently it seems that they want to agree, in reality they are plotting new wars. Pretense has never brought true good, either in the civil order or in the religious order. At the most, a few shadows of a fleeting good. And so here is how they are converting that peace, so praised with words but not with deeds, into preparations for war. As you can already see, many different races have united to fight, some with one pretext, some with another, and more will unite together. But I will use the union of these races, because for the coming of the kingdom of my divine will, it is necessary to have the union of all races by means of another war, much more extensive than the last one, in which Italy was involved financially. Through the union of these races, the peoples will come to know one another, and after the war, the diffusion of the kingdom of my will be easier. Therefore, have patience in bearing my privation. This is the void that my justice wants to form, in order to defend my persecuted love. You pray and offer everything, so that the kingdom of my fiat may come soon. End of the reading. The 31st of March 1929, Volume 25. Absolute Rights of the Divine Will. How the human will changed the human destiny and the divine. How if man had not sinned, Jesus was to come upon earth glorious and with a sceptre of command. Man was to be the bearer of his Creator. I feel within me the continuous power of the divine fiat that envelops me with such empire as to give no time to my dying will to do the slightest act. And it glories in not letting it die completely, because if it did so, it would lose its prestige of operating over a human will that, while it is alive, voluntarily receives the vital act of the divine fiat upon itself. And it is content with living while dying, so as to give life and absolute dominion to the supreme volition that, victorious with its divine rights, extends its boundaries and sings victory over the dying will of the creature, that though dying, smiles and feels happy and honoured that a divine will has its field of action within its soul. Now, while I was feeling myself under the empire of the divine fiat, my sweet Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "Little daughter of my divine will, you must know that these are absolute rights of my divine fiat to have primacy over each act of the creature, and one who denies its primacy takes its divine rights away from it that are due to it by justice, because it is the creator of the human will. Who can tell you, my daughter, how much evil a creature can do when she reaches the point of withdrawing from the will of her Creator. See, one act of the first man withdrawing from our divine will was enough, reaching the point of changing the destiny of the human generations. Not only this, but the very destiny of our divine will. If Adam had not sinned, the eternal Word, who is the very will of the Celestial Father, was to come upon earth, glorious, triumphant, and dominator, accompanied visibly by his angelic army, that all were to see. And with the splendour of his glory, he was to charm everyone and draw everyone to himself with his beauty, crowned as king and with a sceptre of command, so as to be king and head of the human family, in such a way as to give creatures the great honour of being able to say, "We have a king who is man and God." More so, since your Jesus was not coming from heaven to find man infirm, because had he not withdrawn from my divine will, no illnesses, either of soul or of body, were to exist. In fact, it was the human will that almost drowned the poor creature with pains. The divine fiat was untouchable by any pain, and so was man to be. Therefore I was to come to find man happy, holy, with the fullness of the goods with which I had created him. But because he wanted to do his will, he changed our destiny. And since it was decreed that I was to descend upon earth, and when the divinity decrees, no one can move it, I only changed the manner and the appearance, but I did descend, though under most humble guises, poor and with no apparatus of glory, suffering and crying, and loaded with all the miseries and pains of man. The human will made me come to find man unhappy, blind, deaf, and mute, full of all miseries, and I, in order to heal him, was to take him upon myself, and so as not to strike fear in them, I was to show myself as one of them, become their brother, and give them the medicines and the remedies that were needed. So the human will has the power to render man happy or unhappy, a saint or a sinner, healthy or sick. See then, if the soul decides always, always to do my divine will and to live in it, she will change her destiny, and my divine will fling itself upon the creature. It will make her its prey. Giving her the kiss of creation, it will change appearance and manner. Clasping her to its bosom, it will say to her, "Let us put everything aside. The first times of creation have come back for you and for me. Everything will be happiness between you and me, and you will live in our house as our daughter, in the abundance of the goods of your Creator. Listen, my little newborn of my divine will. If man had not sinned, if he had not withdrawn from my divine will, I would have come upon earth. But do you know how? Full of majesty as when I rose again from death. Even though I had my humanity similar to that of man, united to the eternal Word, how different was my resurrected humanity, glorified, clothed with light, not subject to either suffering or dying. I was the divine triumpher. On the other hand, before dying, though voluntarily, my humanity was subject to all pains. Even more, I was the man of sorrows. And since man had his eyes still dazzled by the human will, and therefore he was still infirm, few were the ones who saw me resurrected, and this served to confirm my resurrection. Then I ascended into heaven, to give man the time to take the remedies and the medicines, so that he might recover and dispose himself to know my divine will, in order to live, not of his will, but of mine. And so I will be able to show myself full of majesty and of glory in the midst of the children of my kingdom. Therefore, the resurrection is the confirmation of the fiat voluntas tua on earth as it is in heaven. After such a long sorrow suffered by my divine will for many centuries, of not having its kingdom upon earth and its absolute dominion, it was right that my humanity placed its divine rights in safety and realised its original purpose and mine of forming its kingdom in the midst of creatures. Moreover, in order to further confirm for you how the human will change this destiny and that of the divine will with regard to it, you must know that in the whole history of the world, two persons only have lived of divine will, without ever doing their own, and these were the Sovereign Queen and myself, and the difference between us and the other creatures is infinite, so much so that not even our bodies were left on earth. They had served as royal palace for the divine fiat, and the divine fiat felt inseparable from our bodies, and therefore it claimed them, and with its ruling strength it kidnapped our bodies, together with our souls, into its celestial fatherland. And why all this? The whole reason is that our human wills never had one act of life, but all the dominion and the field of action was of my divine will. Its power is infinite, its love is insuperable. After this he kept silent, and I felt I was swimming in the sea of the fiat, and oh, how many things I comprehended. And my sweet Jesus added, "But my daughter, by not doing my divine will, the creature casts confusion in the order that my divine majesty kept in the creation. She dishonours herself. She descends down below. She places herself at a distance from her Creator. She loses the origin, the means, and the end of that divine life that with so much love was infused in her in the act of being created. We loved this man so much that we placed in him our divine will as origin of life. We wanted to feel enraptured by him. We wanted to feel in him our strength, our power, our happiness, and our same continuous echo. And who could ever allow us to feel and see this, if not our divine will bilocated in him? We wanted to see in man the bearer of his Creator, who was to make him happy in time and eternity. Therefore, when he did not do our divine will, we felt vividly the great sorrow of our work disordered. Our echo ended, our enrapturing strength that was to enrapture us to give him new surprises of happiness converted into weakness. In some, it turned upside down. This is why we cannot tolerate such a disorder in our work. And if I have spoken so much about my divine fiat, the purpose is precisely this. We want to place man in the order that he may return to the first steps of his creation, and our will, flowing with him as vital humour, may form again our bearer, our royal palace upon earth, his happiness and ours. End of the reading. There are no more readings today. There are no more readings this month. See you next month.